My girlfriend invited her male friends, including her lover, to our wedding and said she would cheat on me, so I cut her off immediately. When she realized I wasn't bluffing, she started claiming it was just a joke. My name is Tyler, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a mechanical engineer and have been living what I'd consider a pretty decent life. For the past 3 years, I've been with my fiancée Jessica, and we got engaged about 6 months ago. Everything in our relationship seemed solid and stable, or at least that's what I believed at the time. We had been in the middle of planning our engagement party when this whole situation started. We weren't going for anything too extravagant or over the top, just a nice gathering of family and friends at this venue in downtown Miami that Jessica had picked out herself. She seemed really excited about it, and honestly, so was I. Everything had been progressing smoothly with our planning until this particular Wednesday evening. We were sitting at my kitchen table doing what normal couples do, going over the guest list and making sure all the details were in order. Jessica had her laptop open and was working on creating the invitations, while I was double-checking the head count numbers for the catering. It was standard relationship stuff, the kind of mundane but important tasks that come with planning any event. That's when she casually dropped what felt like a bomb on me. Without even looking up from her typing, she said, "Oh, I'm inviting Kyle too." I immediately looked up from my notes, confused by this sudden addition to our guest list. "Kyle, your ex Kyle?" I asked, wanting to make sure I had heard her correctly. She didn't even pause in her typing as she confirmed it. "Yeah, he's important to me. He was there for me before you were." Then she gave me this look. You know, the kind where someone is clearly testing you to see how you'll react. "You're not insecure, right?" she asked with a tone that suggested I'd better give the right answer. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not some jealous psycho boyfriend who goes through his partner's phone or gets upset when she has male friends. I've never been that type of person, and I don't care if she maintains friendships with people from her past. But inviting your ex-boyfriend to your engagement party? That felt completely different to me. That seemed like bringing a knife to a birthday party. Just fundamentally inappropriate for the occasion. I kept my voice calm and measured when I told her, "I'm uncomfortable with that." I thought this was a reasonable response to what seemed like an unreasonable request. Apparently, I was wrong. She rolled her eyes at me like I had just asked her to explain quantum physics or something equally ridiculous. "This isn't your party to control, Tyler," she said, with an edge to her voice that I hadn't heard before. Then she delivered the line that would stick with me for a long time. "I don't owe you loyalty. We're not even married yet. Stop acting like I belong to you, dude." I sat there for a moment, completely stunned by what she had just said. My fiancée, the woman I was supposed to marry in just 4 months, had just told me that she doesn't owe me loyalty. I tried to process this information, wondering what exactly you're supposed to say in response to something like that. Here we were, engaged to be married, together for 3 years, with a joint bank account and her name on my lease. We had built what I thought was a life together, but apparently she felt that loyalty was something that only kicked in after we signed a marriage certificate. I took a deep breath and tried to collect my thoughts before responding. "Do whatever you think is appropriate," I said, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. She smiled at my response like she had just won some kind of victory in a game I didn't even know we were playing. She immediately went back to her typing with renewed enthusiasm. "Great, I knew you'd understand," she said cheerfully. "Kyle's really excited to catch up with everyone." The casual way she mentioned his excitement made my stomach turn. How long had they been discussing this? How many conversations had they already had about our engagement party? The rest of that evening was incredibly weird and uncomfortable. Jessica spent the entire time texting someone constantly on her phone. I had a pretty good idea who it was, but I didn't want to ask and start another argument. She wasn't just occasionally checking her messages either. She was giggling at her phone every few minutes, not just smiling or chuckling, but full-on teenage girl giggles. The kind of reaction you have when someone is being flirty or saying things that genuinely amuse you. When I finally couldn't take it anymore and asked who she was talking to, she immediately got defensive about it. "It's just work stuff," she said, but her tone suggested I had no right to even ask the question. Work stuff at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night? Right. That seemed completely plausible. I decided to go to bed early that night, but sleep didn't come easily. I just kept lying there thinking about that phrase she had said, "I don't owe you loyalty." I couldn't stop turning it over in my mind. What kind of person says that to their fiancé? If you don't owe me loyalty now, after 3 years together and an engagement, when exactly does that obligation kick in? After we sign the marriage certificate? After the honeymoon? Or maybe never? What really bothered me was that she hadn't even tried to make me feel better about the Kyle situation. There was no reassurance like, Kyle and I are just friends now, or I want you to meet him, so you'll see there's nothing there. Instead, it was just a straightforward, I don't owe you loyalty, and you can't control me. That told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities lay. The next morning, Jessica was back to being completely cheerful, as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. She was making breakfast and chatting about party decorations like we were just a normal couple planning a happy celebration. Meanwhile, I was sitting there wondering if I even knew the person I was supposed to marry. I think we should do navy blue and gold for the colors, she said, while flipping pancakes, playing the role of the perfect domestic goddess. Then she added something that made my blood run cold. Kyle always said I looked good in navy blue. Not, I think I look good in navy blue, or even, I look good in navy blue. It was Kyle always said I looked good in navy blue. She was making decoration decisions for our engagement party based on compliments from her ex-boyfriend. I just nodded and continued drinking my coffee, but something fundamental had shifted inside me that night. When someone tells you they don't owe you loyalty, you better believe them. And you better start planning accordingly. That Friday, my sister called me to check in on how the wedding planning was going. I found myself telling her about the whole Kyle situation, and she went quiet for a long minute after I finished explaining what had happened. Tyler, she said finally, her voice serious. That's not normal. You know that, right? I don't know anymore, I admitted. She made me feel like I was being controlling for not wanting her ex at our engagement party. You're not controlling, my sister said firmly. You're being a normal human being with normal boundaries. What's next? Is she going to invite him to the bachelor party? That actually made me laugh, but it wasn't funny. Because honestly, I wasn't entirely sure she wouldn't suggest something like that. The weird part was that I wasn't even angry anymore about the whole situation. I was just tired. Tired of feeling like I was walking on eggshells around her, tired of second-guessing myself, and tired of feeling like I was somehow competing with a ghost from her past. But here's the thing about being an engineer. You learn to think systematically about problems. When you have a structural issue in a building or a bridge, you don't just slap some duct tape on it and hope for the best. You analyze the entire system, figure out where the weak points are, and either fix them properly or build around them. And right then, I realized I had a serious problem that needed solving. I started by pulling up our joint wedding account online. There was $18,000 sitting there, money we'd been saving for months in preparation for our big day. Looking at the bank records, the breakdown was pretty clear in black and white. I had contributed $14,000, while she had put in $4,000. It seemed only fair that I should take back what was rightfully mine, right? I initiated the transfer online to move my portion back to my personal account. It would take a couple of days to process completely, but that was fine with me. By the time she noticed what had happened, the money would already be safely in my account. Then I started the process of canceling everything that was in my name. The venue, the photographer, the caterer, all of it. By Sunday morning, the day of the engagement party, I had everything handled on my end. The bank account had been separated, the major contracts had been dealt with, and I had even found a decent apartment across town that was closer to my office. I felt like I had my ducks in a row for whatever was about to happen. Jessica woke up that morning actually singing in the shower. Not humming, but full-on singing like she was the star of some romantic comedy. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the kitchen drinking my coffee and running through my mental checklist one more time, making sure I hadn't forgotten any important details. I'm so excited for tonight, she said, as she practically bounced into the kitchen wearing her bathrobe. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Perfect. That was certainly one way to describe what was about to happen. I'm sure it will be exactly what you're looking for, I replied, choosing my words carefully. She leaned over and kissed my cheek, which was the first time she had shown me any real affection in weeks. Then she started making breakfast while humming some song I didn't recognize. It was probably something Kyle had introduced her to, knowing how things had been going lately. I finished my coffee and went to get dressed for what I suspected would be a memorable evening. I chose a black suit with a white shirt and a simple tie. Nothing too fancy, but I wanted to look good for what was probably going to be my last public appearance as Jessica's fiancé. When we arrived at the venue, I have to admit it looked really nice. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, making small talk and congratulating us on our engagement. It was all very normal party atmosphere, and I was actually starting to relax a little bit. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe the evening would go smoothly after all. Then Kyle showed up. This guy walked into the venue like he owned the place. He was tall with a fake tan, wearing one of those shirts that tries way too hard to look casually expensive, but probably costs more than my monthly car payment. He had this smug smile plastered on his face, and he was carrying a gift bag. But here's the thing that immediately caught my attention. The gift wasn't for both of us. It was specifically for Jessica. When she spotted him, Jessica practically ran across the room. "Kyle!" she squealed with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from her in months. They embraced in a hug that lasted way too long. I'm talking about awkwardly, uncomfortably long. Long enough that other people at the party started noticing and exchanging glances with each other. He handed her the gift right there in front of everyone, and she opened it immediately instead of setting it aside like you normally would at a party. It was some kind of necklace with a little pendant on it. She actually got teary-eyed looking at it, touching the pendant with obvious emotion. "You remember everything," she said to him, her voice soft and intimate in a way that made my stomach turn. "Of course I do, Jess," he replied, using that nickname she had told me once that she hated. Apparently, that had been another lie. For the rest of the party, Kyle was basically glued to Jessica's side. He kept his hand on her back when they were talking to people, whispered jokes in her ear that made her laugh, and brought her drinks without being asked. Meanwhile, I was standing around feeling like some kind of party decoration that nobody really noticed or cared about. At one point, my mom came up to me with a concerned expression on her face. "Honey, who's that man with Jessica?" she asked. "Her ex-boyfriend," I said simply. My mom gave me one of those looks that only mothers can give. "Her ex at your engagement party?" "Yeah, she said he was important to her." Mom didn't say anything else, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She's not a stupid woman, and she could clearly see that something was very wrong with this picture. About an hour into the party, I was getting myself a beer when I happened to overhear two of Jessica's friends, Lisa and Chloe, talking near the bathroom. They didn't see me around the corner, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "I can't believe she actually invited him," Lisa was saying in a hushed voice. "She told me she's not even sure she loves Tyler," Chloe whispered back. "She said Kyle makes her feel alive again." "What's she going to do?" "I don't know, but she's been texting him nonstop for weeks. This whole engagement thing. I think she's having second thoughts." I stood there for a moment, letting those words sink in completely. Then I walked back to the party with a strange sense of clarity about what I needed to do. I walked back to the party and grabbed the microphone from the DJ. The room gradually quieted down as people realized someone was about to make a speech. All eyes turned to me, including Jessica's, who was still standing next to Kyle with a confused expression on her face. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming tonight," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. The silence was complete now, with everyone waiting to hear what I had to say. I just wanted to say something. I looked directly at Jessica, who was starting to look genuinely worried about where this was heading. "To Jessica, may you find exactly what you're looking for because clearly it isn't me." Then I handed the microphone back to the DJ and walked out of the venue. I didn't run or make a dramatic scene. I just walked calmly toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear people starting to murmur and Jessica calling my name with increasing desperation. But I kept walking straight to my car without looking back. I got in, started the engine, and drove home while my phone started buzzing before I had even left the parking lot. First, it was a text message, then another. Then it just started ringing nonstop. I turned the ringer off and drove the rest of the way home in complete silence. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a minute, just breathing and taking in the moment. The house looked exactly the same as when we had left just 2 hours earlier, but everything felt fundamentally different now. It was like I was looking at someone else's life from the outside. I went inside and sat down on my couch while my phone continued lighting up like a Christmas tree on the coffee table. There were texts, missed calls, and voicemails, all from Jessica. I could see the previews scrolling by on the screen. "Where did you go?" "Tyler, please come back." "Everyone's asking where you are." "This is embarrassing." I turned the phone face down on the table and went to change out of my suit. The voicemails started coming in around midnight. I could hear my phone vibrating against the coffee table from my bedroom, but I didn't check any of them. Whatever she had to say at this point, I wasn't ready to hear it. Surprisingly, I actually slept pretty well that night. Better than I had in weeks, actually. I guess that's what happens when you finally stop pretending that everything is fine and accept reality for what it is. Sunday morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when someone started pounding on my front door. This wasn't polite knocking. This was full-on pounding like the house was on fire or someone was dying. The sound echoed through the entire house and probably woke up half my neighbors. I looked through the peephole and saw Jessica standing on my doorstep, still wearing her party dress from the night before. Her hair looked like she had been running her hands through it all night, and her makeup was smeared under her eyes with mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked like she had been up crying since the exact moment I walked out of that venue. I opened the door, and she immediately pushed past me into the house, already yelling before she was fully inside. "Are you serious right now?" she screamed. "Is this some kind of prank? So I invited my ex? What's the big deal? You're really throwing everything away over that?" She was pacing around my living room like a caged animal, gesturing wildly with her hands. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying all night, and the expensive dress she had picked out special for the party was now wrinkled and had what looked like wine stains on it. I leaned against the doorframe and just watched her fall apart in my living room. 3 years together, and this was the first time I was really seeing who she was underneath all the charm and polish. Here was this frantic, desperate person who couldn't handle not getting her way. She kept ranting about how I had embarrassed her, how people didn't know what to do after I left, how her parents were mortified by the whole scene. Like the real problem was that I had made her look bad in front of everyone. Not that she had invited her ex-boyfriend to our engagement party and spent the entire night hanging all over him. I stayed calm and told her the truth, that she was the one who had thrown everything away when she made it clear who she really wanted to be with. That just made her even more frantic and desperate. She started doing that thing where people try to rewrite history in real time. Suddenly, Kyle was just a friend. The constant texting was nothing important, and the gift was just him being nice. All the stuff she had been rubbing in my face for weeks was now being minimized like it had never happened. But then I brought up what I had overheard her friend saying at the party, about her not being sure she loved me, about Kyle making her feel alive again. Her whole face went white when she realized I had heard that conversation between Lisa and Chloe. She tried to backtrack immediately, saying it was taken out of context and begging me to work through this together. She started crying those big, ugly sobs that make your whole body shake. The kind of crying that's more about panic than actual sadness. I asked her to just be honest with me for once, and that's when the mask finally came off completely. She told me I was going to regret this decision, that she and Kyle were perfect together, and that they always had been. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Wait," I said before she could leave. "You need to come get your stuff." She turned around, and for a second I thought she might try to argue about that too. "Fine, I'll be back tomorrow," she said. "Bring someone with you," I told her. "I don't want this turning into another scene." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows throughout the entire house. I spent that evening going through her belongings because I wanted to get everything packed up and ready to go. I just wanted this whole situation over with so I could move on with my life. Then I got to her desk drawer and found something that made my stomach drop. There were photos, not just 1 or 2 old pictures you might keep for memories, but a whole stack of them. Kyle with his arm around her at some beach, Jessica laughing at something he said at a restaurant, the two of them at what looked like a wedding, all dressed up and looking way too comfortable together. But that wasn't even the worst part of what I discovered. Under the photos were letters, actual handwritten letters from Kyle, and they were postmarked from the last few months while we were engaged and planning our wedding. I opened one and immediately wished I hadn't. "I can't believe you're getting married," it started. "I still think about what we had together. You were the one that got away, Jess." Another one said, "Seeing your engagement photos on social media messed me up for days. You look happy, but do you really love him the way you loved me?" There were 5 letters total, getting progressively more intense and desperate. Kyle was basically begging her to reconsider the engagement, telling her she was making a mistake, that they belonged together. And she had kept every single one of them. The last letter was dated just 2 weeks before our engagement party. "I know you invited me, and I know what that means. We both know this marriage isn't right for you. Let's talk when I see you." I sat there staring at these letters, realizing that the whole damn situation had been planned from the very beginning. This wasn't some innocent friendship or coincidental reconnection. They had been scheming behind my back for months. I threw everything into boxes and bags, letting her sort through her own mess when she came to get it all. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister asking if I was okay after whatever had happened at the party. I told her I'd call her later and turned the phone off completely. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like I could actually breathe freely. No more pretending not to notice the obvious signs. No more competing with a ghost for my own fiancé's attention. The truth was finally out in the open. The funny thing was, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was relieved. It's better to find out who someone really is before you marry them than after you've already signed the papers and made it legal. And Jessica had just shown me exactly who she was. Someone who thought loyalty was optional, who would rather chase excitement than build something stable, and who would throw away 3 years the moment something shinier came along. I spent the rest of Sunday doing normal, everyday things. Around dinner time, I finally listened to her voicemails. There were 14 of them, starting angry and getting progressively more desperate as the night had gone on. The last one was from around 7 a.m., her voice all hoarse and shaky, begging me to call her back so we could fix this mess. But there wasn't anything to fix. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to be with you. You can't negotiate your way back into someone's heart when they've already given it to someone else. I deleted all the messages and went back to my normal Sunday evening routine. It was the best decision I ever made. Monday morning, I woke up at my normal time, made coffee, and went to work like nothing had happened. It felt strange driving to the office knowing I was technically single again, but it was also kind of liberating. No more texts asking when I'd be home. No more having to check in about dinner plans. No more walking on eggshells around someone's unpredictable moods. My coworkers didn't know about the engagement party disaster yet, so it was just a normal workday for everyone else. Around 7 p.m., she showed up at my house with her dad. Poor guy looked embarrassed as hell, like he knew exactly what his daughter had done and didn't approve of any of it. He'd always been decent to me during the 3 years we were together. He worked construction for 25 years, a straightforward guy who didn't put up with nonsense from anyone. "Tyler," he said when I opened the door, his voice apologetic. "Sorry about all this. It's fine. Her stuff's in boxes by the door," I replied. It took about 20 minutes to load everything into his truck. I didn't mention the letters or photos I had found. I figured she'd discover them when she unpacked and would realize that I knew exactly how deep her betrayal had gone. Jessica didn't say a single word the entire time. She just directed her dad where to put things and avoided making eye contact with me. When they were finished loading everything, she walked back to the door one last time. "This is really it?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "You're not going to change your mind?" "This is really it," I confirmed. She looked like she might start crying again, but her dad was already in the truck waiting for her. She got in without another word, and they drove away into the evening. The following week, things started getting interesting in ways I hadn't expected. Tuesday morning, I was at my desk when I got a call from an unknown number. "Tyler, this is Patricia, Jessica's mom," the voice said. I almost hung up immediately, but Patricia had always been decent to me during our relationship. She was a nice lady who had taught middle school for 25 years before retiring. It wasn't her fault her daughter had turned out to be such a train wreck. "I wanted to call and apologize for what happened at your party," she said, "and for how Jessica's been behaving. I wasn't expecting that at all." "You don't need to apologize for her choices," I told her. "Yes, I do. We raised her better than that. What she did was completely inappropriate and frankly embarrassing for our whole family." She went on to tell me that she'd had a long, serious talk with Jessica about respect and commitment, and about how you absolutely don't invite your ex-boyfriend to your engagement party. Apparently, the conversation hadn't gone well at all. "She kept saying you were being controlling and that Kyle was just a friend," Patricia explained. "But I've been married for 32 years, Tyler. I know what it looks like when someone's heart isn't fully committed to their relationship." Before we hung up, she said something that really stuck with me. "You didn't deserve any of that." She ruined the best thing she ever had. That same week, I started hearing things through our mutual friends. Nothing too dramatic or over the top, just the usual gossip that spreads when people break up publicly. Most of it was people asking what had actually happened, since I had left pretty abruptly and Jessica wasn't giving anyone straight answers about the situation. My friend Connor, who had been at the party, texted me Thursday night. "Dude, that was wild on Sunday. Jessica spent the rest of the night crying and Kyle just disappeared. What's the real story?" I gave him the basic facts without getting into all the personal details and drama. He responded with, "Wow, that's rough. But honestly, the whole Kyle thing was weird to watch. Everyone was talking about it. It turned out I wasn't the only person who thought the whole situation was completely inappropriate. Multiple people had commented to each other about how strange it was that her ex-boyfriend was there, how he was acting way too familiar with her, and how uncomfortable it made everyone feel to witness." The really interesting news came Friday afternoon when my sister called me, actually laughing. "You need to hear this," she said with obvious amusement in her voice. "Lisa just texted me. Kyle dumped Jessica yesterday. I almost choked on my coffee." "What?" "Apparently he told her he wasn't looking for anything serious and that maybe they could hang out sometime. Classic player move. So let me get this straight. Jessica had thrown away a 3-year relationship and our entire engagement for a guy who wasn't even interested in dating her seriously. She had been building up this whole elaborate fantasy in her head about getting back together with Kyle, and he was just messing with her for fun. According to Lisa, Jessica had been calling in sick to work and crying constantly. She kept saying she had made a huge mistake and didn't know how to fix what she had done. I felt absolutely nothing when I heard this news. Maybe I should have felt bad for her, or vindicated, or angry, but mostly I just felt tired. Like this whole dramatic saga was finally over, and I could move on with my life without looking back. Meanwhile, the gossip mill kept churning with new information. Word was getting around about what had happened at the engagement party, and apparently it wasn't reflecting well on Jessica's professional reputation. She worked in marketing, where image and relationships matter a lot for success. Having your engagement fall apart publicly because you invited your ex-boyfriend doesn't exactly scream good judgment to potential clients who might want to work with you. I heard through Connor, who knew someone at her company, that she had lost 2 major clients who decided they didn't want to work with someone whose personal life was such a public mess. Her boss had also quietly moved her to a smaller team, handling less important accounts. It turns out that being a marketing representative who can't handle her own public relations is kind of a career liability. Who would have thought that actions have consequences? I spent that weekend apartment hunting and found a decent 1-bedroom place about 15 minutes closer to my office. The rent was a little higher than what I'd been paying, but with my recent raise, I could easily afford it without any financial stress. Sunday evening, I was packing up some of my belongings when I got a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it might be Jessica trying to reach me from a different phone, but it turned out to be Kyle. "Hey man, sorry about everything that went down," the message read. "Jessica told me you guys broke up. Didn't mean for things to get complicated." I stared at that text for a full minute, completely amazed by the audacity. This guy had spent weeks trying to break up my engagement, succeeded in his goal, then dumped my ex-fiancée when he got what he wanted. And now he was apologizing like it was all just some innocent misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand. I deleted the message without responding. Some people aren't worth the energy it takes to tell them what you really think about their behavior. 2 months after the engagement party disaster, I was completely settled into my new apartment and honestly loving my life. I had been hitting the gym regularly for the first time in years. Nothing crazy or obsessive, just basic weightlifting and cardio 3 times a week to stay in shape. It turns out that when you're not spending every evening walking on eggshells around your partner, you actually have time for things like taking care of yourself. I wasn't dating anyone and wasn't really actively looking either. After 3 years with someone who turned out to be completely different than I thought, I was genuinely enjoying just being by myself for a while. I was learning what I actually like to do when I wasn't constantly negotiating with someone else about every little decision. Life was simple, predictable, and completely drama-free. I should have known it wouldn't last. It was a Tuesday evening in late December when I was getting home from the gym. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I saw a familiar car parked in the visitors section. A silver Honda Civic with a distinctive dent in the rear bumper from when Jessica had backed into a mailbox about 2 years ago. My stomach immediately dropped. I hadn't heard from her in over a month, not since those desperate voicemails the week after the party. I grabbed my gym bag and headed for the elevator, hoping she hadn't seen me arrive. No such luck. As soon as I hit the call button for the elevator, I heard her voice behind me calling my name. I turned around to see her approaching. She looked different, thinner, like she hadn't been eating much. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut in one of those dramatic styles women get when they're trying to reinvent themselves after a major breakup. She asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I let her come up to my apartment. She looked around like she was touring a museum exhibit, commenting on how nice the place was. I remained standing while she sat down on my couch without being invited. The whole performance was completely predictable. She had made a huge mistake, the biggest mistake of her entire life. Kyle had used her and never wanted a real relationship, just wanted to see if he could break us up. When he succeeded in destroying our engagement, he got bored and moved on to someone else. She started crying, but not the angry tears from that morning at my old house. These were the quiet, defeated kind that made her whole body slump forward. She had thrown away everything good in her life for someone who didn't even care about her. 3 years together, our future, all our wedding plans, gone for absolutely nothing. Now she wanted to make it right. We could work through this, couldn't we? We had been good together, we were happy, we were planning a wedding for crying out loud. Surely this was something we could get past. I reminded her about the loyalty comment, about her telling me Kyle was better than me, about her choosing him publicly in front of everyone who mattered to us. Each point I made caused her to flinch like I was hitting her with a physical blow. She had an excuse for everything, of course. She was confused. Kyle was messing with her head. She was angry and lashing out without thinking. People make mistakes, right? That's what love was supposed to be about. Forgiveness and second chances. I looked at her sitting there on my couch, crying over the consequences of her own choices, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no urge to comfort her or make her feel better. Just complete emptiness where all those emotions used to be. The whole situation was pathetic, really. She had only figured out that I was supposedly the love of her life after her first choice had kicked her to the curb. Now she wanted to come back to the backup plan. She was willing to go to counseling, do whatever it took to fix things between us. When I told her no, she looked genuinely shocked, like she couldn't believe I wouldn't take her back after everything she had put me through. She tried the guilt trip next. 3 years together, and I wouldn't even try to work things out? I explained that there was nothing to work out. She had shown me who she really was, and I believed her. She didn't make a mistake. She made a choice, actually a series of deliberate choices. And now she got to live with the consequences of those decisions. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back with one final attempt at manipulation. I was going to regret this, she said. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. No, I told her as I opened the door. You leaving me was the best thing that ever happened to me. She left without another word. I closed the door, locked it securely, and went back to my normal Tuesday evening routine. I made dinner, watched the news, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. For the first time since this whole ordeal had started, I felt completely at peace with my decision. There's something incredibly liberating about having someone show their true colors so clearly that you never have to wonder what if about the relationship. The funny part was how obvious her game plan had been from the moment she walked back into my life. Wait for me to get over the initial hurt, then show up looking vulnerable and remorseful, expecting me to welcome her back with open arms like I was some kind of emotional doormat who had just been waiting around for her to realize her mistake. But I wasn't the same guy she had left 2 months ago. That guy might have taken her back, might have convinced himself that everyone deserves a second chance, might have been grateful just to have someone familiar in his life again. This guy knew better. This guy had learned that when someone shows you they think loyalty is optional, you believe them the first time, and you don't give them another opportunity to prove it again. I spent the next few days wondering if she would try again, show up at my office, send letters, get mutual friends to plead her case, but nothing came. Maybe she finally understood that some bridges can't be rebuilt once you burn them down. Or maybe she just found someone else to play backup plan for her next relationship disaster. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The best part was realizing that I didn't miss her at all. I missed the idea of having a partner, sure, but I didn't miss her specifically. What I had now was better. Peace, stability, and the freedom to build my life exactly the way I wanted it. And if someone came along who actually appreciated that life and wanted to be part of it, great. But I wasn't settling for less ever again. Some lessons are worth learning the hard way. 6 months after the engagement party disaster, I was doing better than I had ever been. Work was going great. The promotion had led to even bigger projects, and I was building a solid reputation as someone who could handle complex structural challenges. And I met someone. Her name was Melissa, and she worked as a teacher at the elementary school near my office. We had met at a coffee shop when she was grading papers, and I was working on some project plans during my lunch break. She seemed completely normal. No drama, no ex-boyfriend baggage, just a regular person who liked movies and hiking and didn't feel the need to test my boundaries every 5 minutes. It was a Saturday afternoon when we were at the big supermarket downtown. We were in the pasta aisle when I saw her, Jessica, standing about 20 feet away, holding a shopping basket and talking to some guy I didn't recognize. He was tall and decent looking, wearing an expensive jacket that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. My first instinct was to turn around and go the other way. I didn't need this drama in my life, and I definitely didn't want Melissa getting dragged into whatever scene Jessica might try to create. But it was too late. She had already spotted me. I steered our cart toward a different shelf, hoping Jessica would just mind her own business and let us shop in peace. No such luck. She called my name across the aisle like we were old friends, then walked over with her new guy trailing behind, looking confused about why they were approaching complete strangers. Jessica looked Melissa up and down with obvious judgment, then made some snide comment about how I had already met someone and that it didn't take me very long. I introduced them politely, but Jessica ignored Melissa completely and launched into her whole performance. She had met someone too. This guy Brandon, who was standing behind her looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. But she couldn't just leave it at that and move on with her life. "I forgot to introduce you properly, Brandon," she said with that sharp edge I remembered from our worst fights. "This is my ex, Tyler. We used to date." Then she paused dramatically before delivering the real blow. "Well, we were going to get married until he decided to throw everything away just because he's an insecure person who can't handle his girlfriend having male friends." The grocery store suddenly felt very quiet. Melissa's hand found mine and squeezed gently. Not possessive, just supportive. Brandon looked from Jessica to me and back again, clearly having no idea what he had walked into. When I calmly mentioned that she had invited her ex-boyfriend to our engagement party and spent the entire night hanging all over him, Brandon's expression changed completely. "What is wrong with you?" he asked Jessica, his voice filled with disgust. "You're actually insane." He walked away without another word, leaving his shopping basket right there in the middle of the aisle. We could see him through the store windows getting into his car and driving off without looking back. Jessica stood there for a second, watching him leave, then turned back to me with tears starting to form in her eyes. "Well, you're happy now, aren't you, Tyler?" she said, her voice breaking. I looked at this woman who had been the center of my world for 3 years. The woman I had planned to marry and have kids with and grow old with. The woman who had thrown it all away for a guy who dumped her the second he got what he wanted. And now she had just sabotaged another relationship because she couldn't handle seeing me move on with my life. "I'm not happy or unhappy about what just happened," I said calmly. "That's between you and him." "You turned him against me," she accused. I told him the truth. What he did with that information was his choice. Melissa tugged gently on my arm. "Maybe we should go," she said quietly. As we walked toward the checkout, I could hear Jessica behind us, but I didn't turn around. Whatever else she had to say, it wasn't my problem anymore. "So," Melissa said as we loaded our groceries onto the conveyor belt, "that was your ex." "That was her. She seems intense." I laughed. "That's one word for it. Do you want to talk about it?" I thought about that as we waited in line. Did I want to rehash the whole story? Explain about Kyle and the engagement party and all the drama that had led to this moment? "Not really," I said. "It's old news, ancient history." As we walked to the car, I realized something significant had shifted. For months, the idea of running into Jessica had been this thing I dreaded. Some part of me had been worried about how I would react, whether I would feel anything, whether it would bring back all the hurt and anger from when everything fell apart. But now that it had actually happened, I felt nothing. She was just some person I used to know who couldn't handle seeing me happy. Her problems weren't my problems anymore. Driving home, I realized this was probably the last time I would ever see Jessica. She had shown Brandon exactly who she was in about 30 seconds, and he had made the smart choice. I didn't feel bad for her. She had made her bed, and now she got to lie in it. The best part was that Melissa had seen the whole thing and hadn't run screaming. If anything, she seemed more interested in getting to know me better. It turns out some people actually appreciate stability and honesty in a relationship. Who would have thought? The moral of this whole story is simple. When someone shows you they don't think they owe you loyalty, believe them. And then show them what it looks like when you don't owe them your future. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and not looking back. Jessica taught me that loyalty isn't negotiable in a committed relationship, that actions have consequences, and that some people will always choose excitement over stability. But most importantly, she taught me what I actually deserve in a partner. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though it was painful to learn. Now I'm with someone who understands that loyalty isn't something you earn after signing a marriage certificate. It's something you give freely when you truly care about someone. Melissa and I are taking things slow, but we're building something real based on mutual respect and genuine affection. As for Jessica, I heard through the grapevine that she's still single and still making the same mistakes with different people. Some people never learn, and that's not my problem to solve anymore. I'm exactly where I need to be, with someone who appreciates what we're building together. The engagement party disaster was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. It showed me who Jessica really was before I made the mistake of marrying her. Sometimes life has a funny way of protecting you from your own bad decisions.